The sky over the Ötztal Alps shimmered in that peculiar way it does in early September, sunlit yet sharp with cold. On September 19, 1991, two German hikers, Helmut and Erika Simon, were trekking near the Teisenjoch Pass, a wind-lashed gap between Austria and Italy, when they spotted something strange jutting from the ice. At first, they thought it was trash. Then they thought it was a climber lost to the mountains decades earlier. But as they peered closer, what lay before them was far more unnerving. Half submerged in glacial melt, a human corpse curled awkwardly like a man asleep mid-stride. His flesh was dark and leathery, stretched tight across bone, one arm bent oddly behind his back, his face frozen in an expression neither peaceful nor pained. A crude axe lay nearby. No modern gear, no ID, no answers. Authorities were summoned, but they treated the discovery as a mountaineering fatality, one of many claimed by these slopes over the years. The body, they assumed, belonged to some unlucky climber from the early 20th century, perhaps even a World War I soldier. After all, this region, borderland terrain between Italy and Austria, was a graveyard of past conflicts. It took days to extract the frozen corpse from the ice. The body had been stuck in a hollow for centuries, its lower half entombed in solid glacier. Using jackhammers and pickaxes, the team eventually freed him, but not without damage. The left hip was punctured, several tools scattered at the site were moved or lost. Even the arm position was altered, a detail that would later complicate forensic interpretation. But it wasn't until the body was transferred to Innsbruck University's Forensic Institute that the mystery truly began. The pathologist noticed something unusual. The corpse wasn't just well preserved. It was ancient, eerily so. He carried tools made of stone and copper, not steel. His clothing appeared to be made of stitched animal hides. There were no synthetic fibers, no modern items at all, yet the real shock would come from the lab weeks later. Even today, this moment echoes in documentaries and textbooks alike, the exact day modern science met prehistoric enigma. A body exposed not by accident, but by climate. Melting ice, triggered by a warming trend, had slowly peeled back a layer of time. What emerged wasn't just a man, it was a story buried for over 5 millennia. Scholars still debate whether the discovery was pure coincidence or inevitable in a world of vanishing glaciers. But one thing is certain, the dead man in the ice was about to become one of the most studied humans in history. And his death was far from simple. As the body was flown from the icy slopes to the Forensic Medicine Institute in Innsbruck, no one quite knew what they were dealing with. In early photographs, the corpse looked like a badly frostbitten mountaineer, but something didn't sit right. His belongings were rudimentary. An axe with a copper blade, arrows tipped with stone, a quiver of unfinished shafts. These weren't just old. They were from another world entirely. To settle the debate, the team turned to radiocarbon dating, a method used to determine the age of organic materials by measuring their decay of carbon-14 isotopes. Samples of bone and wood were sent to laboratories in Oxford, Zurich, and Vienna. When the results arrived, they stunned the scientific community. The man in the ice was not a missing hiker. He wasn't from the early 1900s. He had died sometime around 3300 BCE, more than 5,000 years ago. This was no ordinary corpse. This was a relic from the Copper Age, predating the Great Pyramid of Giza. He had lived long before paper, long before the written word, before iron, before Rome, before almost everything. With the news, media interest exploded. The man from the ice was quickly christened Ötzi, a nod to the Ötztal Alps where he had been found. Scientists from all over the world descended upon Austria to examine him. His skin, though darkened by millennia of exposure and freeze-drying, remained intact. His organs were largely preserved. Even the contents of his stomach would soon reveal their secrets. But some initial mistakes proved costly. Because authorities had assumed Ötzi was a recent fatality, his removal from the glacier was handled clumsily. The body had been exposed to temperatures and conditions that accelerated decay. Artifacts were scattered, misidentified, or overlooked. A priceless archaeological site had been treated like a routine accident scene. Interestingly, the location of Ötzi's discovery became a matter of international debate. Found just 92 meters inside Italian territory, the body technically belonged to Italy, not Austria. After some political wrangling, Ötzi was transferred to the South Tyrol Museum of Archaeology in Bolzano, where he remains to this day, in a climate-controlled chamber mimicking the conditions of his icy tomb. And yet, even as he was hailed as Europe's most complete natural mummy, Ötzi remained oddly anachronistic. His body was old, but his death? It had the fingerprints of modern murder, weapon, wound, motive unknown. Scholars still debate whether Ötzi's preservation was fate or a geological fluke, whether he had died exactly where he was found, or if glacial movement had carried him, but time, it seems, had not buried the truth. It had merely iced it over. Ötzi wasn't just old, he was a ghost from a forgotten age. A man who had walked the Alps when agriculture was still in its infancy, when humans lived in small tribes, and when metal was still a novel experiment. And yet here he was, intact, silent, and strangely modern in death. The more researchers examined his remains, the more it became clear. This was not just a discovery. This was a case file. Europe's oldest cold case had just been opened. Measuring approximately 5 foot 3 inches and weighing around 110 pounds, Ötzi was a wiry man in his mid-40s, relatively elderly for his time. His teeth were heavily worn with several cavities, likely caused by a diet high in cereal grains. His bones bore the signs of a hard life: arthritis in the knees and lower back, healed rib fractures, and growth interruptions in his long bones suggesting childhood malnutrition or disease. More revealing, though, was the condition of his skin. It bore over 60 tattoos, simple black lines and crosses etched near joints and along the spine. These weren't ornamental. Scholars believe they had therapeutic purposes, possibly an early form of acupuncture meant to ease chronic pain. But it was his gear that first hinted at something more than survival. Among his belongings were a finely crafted copper axe, an extraordinary item for the time, alongside a longbow, a bearskin cap, a fire-starting kit, and a complex array of layered clothing: grass cape, goat hide coat, leggings, and shoes stuffed with moss for insulation. This wasn't a man lost or unprepared. He was equipped for the alpine elements with sophisticated tools and practical knowledge. Yet one glaring question hung in the cold air. Why was he alone? Most travelers of the time moved in groups. Raiding parties, trading caravans, or tribal units, but Ötzi had no companions. No beasts of burden, just his own footsteps into the ice. The copper axe in particular unsettled researchers. At the time, such a weapon would have been rare, more a symbol of elite status than a common tool. Was he a leader, a craftsman, or had he stolen it? Theories proliferated. Some proposed Ötzi was a shaman or medicine man, venturing into the mountains for spiritual reasons. Others argued he had been exiled, fleeing from tribal retribution. Still others whispered he was a murder victim, his body left in the high passes to be forgotten by time. Scholars still debate whether Ötzi died in solitude by choice, or was chased there, forced into the cold by circumstances darker than nature. What no one could dispute, however, was this: his death had not been gentle. And the forensic trail was just beginning to speak. Laid out like the inventory of a seasoned survivalist, Ötzi's belongings told a story as eloquent as his body. In a world where written language didn't yet exist, his tools, clothes, and personal items became his autobiography, each object whispering clues about his identity, his role in society, and perhaps even the circumstances of his demise. The crown jewel of his kit was the copper axe, the only one of its kind ever found in such pristine condition from that era. Its blade, cast from nearly pure copper and fixed into a U-handle with birch tar and leather binding, was both elegant and functional. More than a weapon, it was a status symbol. At the time, copper metallurgy was cutting-edge technology, reserved for the powerful or the skilled. It suggested that Ötzi either wielded influence in his community or had access to elite resources. Then there was his dagger, crudely shaped from flint and paired with a woven scabbard. Nearby, a retoucher, a small tool made from antler, hinted he could repair or sharpen stone implements on the go. His longbow, unfinished but nearly 6 feet tall, was carved from yew, a toxic yet durable wood ideal for hunting. A quiver held a mix of finished and unfinished arrows, some broken, some ready, most fletched with precision. His fire-starting kit added another layer of intrigue: pieces of flint, dried fungus used as tinder, and a complex blend of plants stored in a birch bark container. Clearly, Ötzi knew how to survive in the alpine wilderness. He wasn't wandering. He was prepared. And then his clothing, a patchwork of materials drawn from goat, bear, and deer. He wore a grass cape, likely for rain protection, and shoes ingeniously crafted with woven netting and moss insulation. Far from primitive, they were engineered for high-altitude trekking. But perhaps the most unusual possessions were not carried in his hands, but etched into his skin. Over 61 tattoos made from charcoal and small incisions ran across his joints and spine. They were not decorative, placed on points commonly associated with pain relief. Some aligned eerily well with acupuncture meridians identified thousands of years later in China. And yet, a contradiction emerged. Here was a man with tools, skill, and knowledge, dying alone in the mountains, his journey interrupted. If he were a respected figure, why no search party? If a criminal or exile, why so well armed? A few fringe theorists have even claimed the axe suggests Ötzi was not from a local tribe, but an outsider, perhaps a trader or emissary, from a distant land. His hybrid gear and unusual weaponry may support the idea. Scholars still debate whether Ötzi's belongings were ceremonial, everyday essentials, or looted trophies. But what's certain is this: every object he carried deepened the enigma of his final hours. And soon, the body itself would reveal the next chapter, written not in ink or bone, but in blood,